Welcome back to Beast Wars Wednesday. I am your host, Predacon Paul.
I am your host, Decepticon Doug.
Decepticon Doug.
Decepticon Doug.
Before we get this party started, we would just like to thank our sponsors, Moving Pictures. They're a great place you can go to watch Ali Hasn't reviews. You can go watch the Repo review show.
And don't forget the hit series, Beast Wars Wednesday.
Yeah. Tune in.
Every other Wednesday, usually.
This episode is called Law of the Jungle. Written by Mark Lyron Young.
And it was directed by Mike Poser. Law of the Jungle begins with a nice little chain reaction of a dragonfly being eaten by a frog, and then the frog gets eaten by a snake, and then the snake gets eaten by an eagle, and then it flies off.
Not an eagle. Eagles don't make that sound.
Hawk?
A hawk. Or a falcon.
And the snake gets eaten by a hawk or falcon. And then we see Dinobot and Cheetor walking around. They're going to do sort of a scouting mission. They're investigating. We're getting the whispers of the near future. Investigating some alien stuff that Rhinox thinks is dangerous. But before we can actually get into that, they are ambushed by
Inferno!
Inferno is showing nothing but enthusiasm for the havoc he's about to wreak. Inferno just loves attacking Maximals. Just loves it. It is the cherry on top of his day.
Dinobot and Cheetor get blasted off the side of a mountain, and Cheetor, being the cat that he is, lands on his feet, which is a nice touch. It's instinctive. When they adopt their beast forms, they have instincts that reflect that beast form. Who knows if raptors could land on their feet, but he just bam, lands on his head. The comedy didn't take away from the intensity of the moment. It was like, oh, that's funny because it's
this little detail.
It makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, that's right. Of course, Cheetor would land on his feet.
Now, apparently Inferno was going a little bit against orders. He just got a little too trigger happy, and he's supposed to wait for a signal from Pterosaur so that the Predacons would all attack together. Pterosaur decides to go and engage the Maximals as well, carrying these, how would you describe them? Like propeller bomb launchers?
Yeah, it's a single device that has its own propulsion system. These hatches open up like a flower blooming, and it launches a cluster of bombs. So the device itself isn't explosive. It's basically the rocket for the payload. In Iron Man, the Jericho weapon, you have the rocket that flies up and then it releases the shell, which then all these tinier bombs that are each propelled with their own repulsor propulsion, then it delivers that, and then they carpet bomb the entire area.
And they kind of resemble Inferno's butt.
I thought that too. The same thing too.
Yeah. Waspinator's hanging back. He's like, Waspinator waiting for signal. He's very adamant about that signal. Pterosaur launches the boom boom thing. It takes out Dinobot and blasts Inferno a little bit too. Pterosaur's like, whoops. And then starts to get pegged in the chest by Cheetor, and then he gets knocked and crashes into a mountain.
With that cool ass weapon of his, I mean, it's more like a rifle.
Yeah.
And the bolts that come out of it are much faster.
In the toy, it's his tail gun. Pterosaur finally orders Waspinator to battle the Maximals because he's doing nothing. Waspinator goes and gets one of those big propeller thingies.
He can barely carry this thing, and he ends up getting pulled down. And then as he's like struggling to get some altitude, he realizes, oh crap, Tigerbot. Only to realize shortly thereafter that it's not Tigerbot, it's Snowstalker. Tigerbot is actually above him on another ledge, who then jumps on top of him, grabs his antennae with his like paws, and he starts like steering him around until finally he releases the bomb, like pounces on him as he hits the ground, and then the cluster bomb that he just released ends up slamming into Waspinator, and he's like, "Dah!"
Waspinator makes such delightful pain noises.
Yeah.
It's pretty great. Inferno engages both Cheetor and Tigatron. Cheetor has to stay in beast mode because he got energon damage, and that's how it be. Tigatron's like, hey, I got this. So he maximizes, pulls out his gun, aims right at Inferno. He's like, I'm taking you down, bozo. And he starts pegging Inferno, and he shoots one too many shots as Inferno goes spiraling out of control. His blast collides with the mountain, but it really could not have been worse because it ignites all of the explosives and weaponry that the Predacons had cached up there, and it causes a huge explosion, which causes a huge landslide that buries Tigatron's Tiger Love Snowstalker. Tigatron realizes immediately what has happened and goes running in to try and save her, but he lifts the rocks up and discovers nothing can be done. Snowstalker is dead. After a bit of a burial, Tigatron looks at the battlefield that they left behind, and the whole area is completely demolished from explosives and gunfire. And he tells Cheetor and Dinobot that he can't have any part of this anymore and refuses to participate in the Beast Wars whatsoever, and he runs off. Dinobot kind of thinks about this, thinking like, you know what? Predacons know what to do with deserters.
Talk to them. Reason with them. With eye lasers and swords.
Dinobot basically goes chasing after Tigatron. Cheetor's like, I don't know what to do. But luckily Optimus is there. He's like, hey, Cheetor! What is going on?
And Cheetor's like, Big Bot!
We've had a bit of a crazy day. As Tigatron is running off, Inferno is kind of hiding out, and he's like, aha, the tiger doesn't want to fight anymore, so I have an idea.
And then they decide what they're going to do is pick him off because he's going to be alone. That'll tip the balance of power into the favor of the Predacons, and it'll please the royalty.
Yeah, that's mostly what they're trying to do. They're trying to avoid Megatron being mad.
There's this nice little moment where they're trying to decide what to do. Inferno, while he's crazy, is still very aware. He's like, do you want to explain our failure to him? He'll probably send us out and call us idiots and tell us to try again. And then Tigatron has some words with Dinobot, who is stalking him. Dinobot's like, yo, you got the instincts of a warrior, son. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to dust yourself off, and you're going to come back and join us, even though you're never really there anyways. And Tigerbot's like, no.
I don't want to do it.
I'm not going to do it.
And Dinobot, he takes a moment to kind of explain the nature of Predacons and what's at risk if the Predacons actually won the Beast Wars.
He transforms and he's like, that's it! Eye laser, eye laser, eye laser. A Predacon wouldn't miss. Ha! And then he's like, get back to base. And he's like, no. And he's like, that's it. And then this time he's actually going to do it. But then Optimus shows up and he's like, hey, Lizardbot, back off. Let me talk to him. Sorry about your pal. And Tigatron's like, yeah, me too.
It hurts. Optimus is trying to urge Tigatron to rejoin the Maximals, saying like, hey, he hates this war just as much as anybody, but he kind of acknowledges that they don't really have a choice in the matter. Dinobot is like, oh, whatever, and he leaves because he doesn't want to deal with this anymore, and he's been told to stand down, so... Pterosaur, Waspinator, and Inferno, they see Dinobot, and they're like, hey, we don't see Tigatron, but we see Dinobot, and Megatron would love it if we killed that guy.
Bring his head on a silver platter.
Pterosaur gives the signal to appease Waspinator, and they all attack in unison and take Dinobot down. The moment he transforms, he gets hit right in the chest. Optimus hears the explosions in the distance with the attack on Dinobot. He's like, I gotta go take care of this. Tigatron's like,
no.
No.
And rightfully so. His heart's broken. I totally get it. Optimus flies off, and in spectacular fashion, Waspinator and Pterosaur, they come flying in. They make a beeline towards Optimus. Optimus is like, boom, and just takes them both out, and off they go.
But Inferno gets the drop on him and knocks him right down, where he gets energon damage and has to transform to beast mode, as does Dinobot. So they are basically incapacitated, and one of Megatron's heaviest hitters is still fully functional and crazy as ever.
What saves everybody's life in this episode is the fact that Inferno, rather than use that kick-ass gun of his to blast apart his enemies, he wants to burn them. So he switches to the flamethrower.
Tigatron takes this opportunity to leap and tackle Inferno to the ground and transform. Inferno, he finds this whole thing very funny. He loves this. He just loves fighting so much. And he starts playing around with fire, and he lights a tree on fire, and just like that, just ticks Tigatron right off. He's like, I like that tree. That was where I sharpened my claws.
Yeah.
And he just blasts Inferno, telling him to leave the wild alone, and Inferno goes flying off, and Tigatron, before putting the tree out, gives a little speech about how the planet's suffering, war is bad, and then he puts it out with his little ice gun.
By the end of this, Tigatron's like, you know what? Let's get back to beast warring.
Because Predacons are bad.
And we've got a duty to protect this planet. He basically tells Optimus the exact same thing Optimus told him not 5 minutes prior. Mm-hmm. And then that's the end of the episode.
The end.
Okay, Doug. If that is your real name, what worked?
I think that to have an episode like this in a kid show, like a discussion kind of on the ethics of war. It's really kind of astounding that they went there, you know? They brought back a character who's, you know, we saw in Fallen Climax, I think that might be the only time we saw Snowstalker, but we kind of knew that Tigatron lived out in the wild and he lived with another tiger, and then to actually like kill off his loved one and have him like grieving and wanting to just abandon the war, that's heavy material. And I think that it's a really tough thing to approach in a show that is essentially geared towards like preteens. It does sprinkle in some light comedy throughout. Waspinator is used very well in this episode. All the Predacons, like they're very funny, but kind of like in the last episode, in ways that are very true to their character.
Yes.
So because the comedy's used sparingly, it doesn't undermine the goal of the episode. But yeah, the fact that they go there, I think there's major props to that. The fact that they kill off, I mean, admittedly a very, very minor character, but it does open up like a floodgate of like questions of like the morality of war, like the very hippie mentality of like, hey, if we all agreed not to fight, there'd never be combat. But the episode doesn't take that side necessarily, but it opens that discussion. Then there's Dinobot's more seasoned, sort of like jaded, like I've been through these battles, I know what the Predacons are like, here's my point of view, and we get to see a little bit of that like clash of ideas.
He's got a much more fundamental understanding of Predacon nature too.
Halfway between them comes an Optimus, who unfortunately we don't get to hear his stance too much. It's kind of cut short. We don't want to have a war, but we need to.
He even says, I hate this war as much as you do, but he has to fight in order to protect the planet.
Like, he knows Megatron well enough to know that he's not just gonna, like, concede. The battle has to happen until one side is defeated.
If they drop their guns, I guarantee you Megatron wouldn't stop until every single one of them is dead. He'd look at it like, well, you did this to yourself. Bang.
What about you? What do you work for you?
Very much the same thing. I enjoyed the deeper meaning behind it. It was nice to see the dynamic of the three Predacons. They kind of reminded me of like a group of little rascals, just sort of like hiding behind a bush. Like, okay, so here's what we're gonna do.
You are so beautiful to me. Can't you see?
Yeah, they've got a great chemistry, those characters. Like, Waspinator and Pterosaur were always kind of funny, but having Inferno in the mix kind of like makes it a nice like trio. Kind of like the Three Stooges, but if they like to light things on fire.
I really liked Optimus's stance, which, I felt he was quite clear. It's not, you're either with us or you're against us or anything like that. He understands that this is a tragic moment for Tigatron, given the fact that his mate just died like an hour ago. He's like, I understand, we're still in the middle of a war, and I'm your commanding officer. Will you come help? He did all of that without saying anything except well, and then Tigatron just sort of like looks away.
Yeah.
Words don't need to be exchanged here, and he goes, okay, I guess you made your choice, and then off he goes. Oh, and he lets Tigatron have that moment.
It's actually really good screenwriting because there's a lot said in very few lines. I mean, essentially, like, he kind of holds true to the ideals of Optimus Prime. Freedom. He believes in freedom is the right of all sentient beings, and that includes his own troops.
Yeah.
Is that they deserve the right to choose what they're going to do. And he's respected that about Tigatron since day one. Tigatron was like, I want to stay in the wild. I don't want to be a part of your crew as they are. And he's like, okay, well, that's your decision. And now I don't want to fight. Okay, that's your decision. Even though I think that more often than not, it would have been tactically more sound for Tigatron to have just stuck around.
Although him not being at the base is the whole reason why they were able to recover from losing the
rectifier coil.
Right, from the Call of the Wild.
Yeah.
It's true. It has also come in handy. Another thing I really like, finally a good character piece for Inferno. The only decent one since Spider's game. Where we get to see him in his full glory, like him being powerful and insane and hungry for battle. And I wonder what would happen with him and Dinobot on the side of the mountain, how that would have ended if Pterosaur hadn't like blasted them apart. That
would have been sweet. You can see that underneath everything, he still harbors a grudge against Tigatron for destroying his colony. And he's just like, oh, destroyer of my colonnade. I'm just like,
Oh,
he hasn't forgotten about
there's
that.
a little bit of venom in that voice.
Yeah.
They're great contrasting characters because Snow Tiger, Fire Ant, Tigatron is the peace-loving hippie who uses like freezing guns, and Inferno is the fiery, like insane warmonger. In a lot of ways, they're kind of like natural enemies.
Ideologically, too, like, Tigatron is free to make his own choices and have a mind of his own. Inferno is basically, he was born in bondage. He's like born into servitude, but he like believes so heavily in the fact that his queen is like, he must serve his queen.
And it's kind of a shame that this is almost one of their only episodes where they are like mortal enemies, because I think that would have been a really interesting dynamic to have carried on through the series. I also got to comment on the vocal performance of Jim Burns in this episode as Inferno. I just think he sounds great. You get to hear more of Inferno's grounded side of like, him pondering, him sort of like scheming a little bit, like the tiger no longer wishes to fight. Most of the moments of Inferno are sort of the big moments where he's like, blah! But like in this one you get to see sort of the more downplayed side, and it sounds cool. He's just got a cool voice.
What's interesting is when he's talking about the fact that the tiger no longer wishes to fight, you can tell that he's like amping himself up, and he's like attempting to control that the instinct to just
It doesn't take too much to shake it and make it explode, but it does take a little bit of shaking. I also really like some of the action, like just the first act of that whole opening battle, I think is marvelous. A great mix of comedy and action, and it all comes to kind of like this really sad, unsatisfying climax. If you're watching and you're like, man, this is awesome, all this fighting is so cool, and then at the end of it, it's like an innocent dies, you're like, oh, that's not as cool. So, Predacon Paul, what didn't work for you?
I have a minor complaint. I feel like the Tigatron found his resolution much too quickly. He just lost somebody he loved, and then it's not even the end of the day yet, and he's just like, you know what? You're right. I do need to join the Maximals and stop the Predacons from being evildoers. It just seemed way too easy. The episode would have had much more of an impact, especially seeing where we're going. All hands have to be on deck, especially near the end of this first season. And for them to lose somebody, a heavy hitter like Tigatron, right when everything's about to hit the fan. Like if by the end of it he's like, all right, Maximal. Tigatron was like, nope, not there yet. And then walked away, that would have been much heavier. This episode could have led into a much more interesting arc had they just let him just sit with that tragedy for a while.
I am inclined to agree. It does clean up a little too tidy. The writing is mostly really strong in this episode, but at the very end, it almost is a little too, like, speechy, like, as long as there are Predacons, we Maximals must defend the planet. It's like, really? That's your final statement on this whole thing? It feels like they're just like, oh no, we got 2 more pages left, and how are we going to resolve this?
I think the problem is the fact that they feel the need to resolve it.
Yeah, have a few episodes where Tigatron is kind of out of commission. Like, there were 3 episodes previously where Tigatron was barely in them, and maybe it would have been stronger to have this slightly earlier in the season, and then literally have like a few episodes where there's no sign of Tigatron. It's something you got to plan out carefully, especially like at this point, like it's almost too late in the season to do that, because we know that right after this, things start to wrap up. This is a hindsight thing. This is entirely hindsight of going like, oh, like if we could go back in time and like, shuffle some of these episodes around and then have this story go here and then have this story go here. This is us trying to paint an ideal world.
Yeah. And we have had years to think about this kind of stuff.
20 years.
20 years.
We are going to give Law of the Jungle 4.5 out of 5 raspberry signals. So we do feel like some of the bigger thematic elements of the episode are so strong that they really do elevate the material to be like a really solid Beast Wars episode. And it's not every day you see a war ethics discussion in a kid's show.
You gotta hand it to them.
Please tell us what you thought of Law of the Jungle. Let us know in the comments. Give us a like if you liked the episode. Please subscribe if you want to keep watching more Beast Wars Wednesday episodes.
Tell your mom.
Follow us on Facebook. Link in the description below. Wow, 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 wow. This is a really...
Damn good cup of coffee. Please.
This is a very...